Blood dripped onto Italian leather, a stark contrast to the quiet New York highway. Gunfire had clipped the engine, and now, $1 million hypercar was nothing but a beautiful tomb. Then, a rusty Ford idled beside it, and a child's voice shattered the deadly silence with an impossible promise. Route 17, winding through the lower Catskills, was desolate at dusk, a shadowed ribbon of asphalt flanked by dense, skeletal pines. Alessio Romano leaned against the rear quarter panel of his Rosso Corsa Ferrari SF90 Stradale, his breathing shallow, the sharp scent of vaporized hybrid coolant mixed with the metallic tang of his own blood. A grazing bullet from a customized Sig Sauer P226 had torn through his bespoke Tom Ford suit jacket and carved a shallow groove into his left shoulder. It hurt, but the betrayal stung worse. Carlo, his most trusted capo, had sold him out to the Genovese faction. The ambush in Manhattan had been swift, forcing Alessio into a chaotic, high-speed exfiltration. He had outrun the pursuit, pushing the SF90 to its absolute limits, but a stray hollow point had pierced the rear engine deck, striking the high-pressure cooling line of the hybrid system. The car's complex telemetry had triggered an immediate thermal lockdown. Now, the head of the Romano Syndicate, a man who commanded hundreds of loyal soldiers and controlled millions in illicit shipping ports, was stranded on a freezing highway with 0 bars of cell service. He checked the magazine of his Glock 19, 14 rounds left. He slid it back into his shoulder holster, adjusting his jacket to hide the weapon. The cold October wind bit through his clothes. He needed a vehicle. The next car that drove by was going to be violently repossessed. Headlights cut through the encroaching darkness. Alessio tensed, his hand hovering over his chest. It wasn't the sleek, menacing silhouette of a black Escalade or a Range Rover that belonged to hitmen. It was a 2004 Ford F-150, its blue paint chipped and fading, the passenger side headlight flickering erratically. The truck slowed, the squeal of worn brake pads echoing through the quiet woods. Alessio stepped back, masking his injury, projecting the cold, untouchable aura that made him a ghost in the underworld. He prepared to draw his weapon, fully intending to hijack the driver and leave them on the shoulder. The truck's passenger window rolled down with a struggling mechanical whine. A little boy, no older than 7, with a mop of curly brown hair and bright, inquisitive eyes, leaned out. He was wearing a faded Batman sweatshirt. "Mister, your spaceship is broken," the boy announced, pointing a small, sticky finger at the smoking rear of the Ferrari. Alessio blinked, momentarily derailed by the sheer absurdity of the situation. His grip on the Glock loosened slightly. "It's not a spaceship, kid. It's just resting." The driver leaned across the bench seat, coming into view. It was a woman in her late 20s. Her hair, the color of toasted almonds, was pulled back into a messy ponytail. She wore a heavy canvas Carhartt jacket, and there was a prominent smudge of dark motor oil across her left cheekbone. Her eyes, a striking shade of hazel, swept over the Ferrari and then locked onto Alessio. They were sharp, exhausted, and completely devoid of the deference Alessio was accustomed to receiving. "Leo, get back inside," she instructed firmly, pulling the boy back by his collar. She looked at Alessio. "You need a tow? Closest station is 15 miles south in Monticello, and I can tell you right now, they don't have a flatbed equipped for a clearance that low. They'll rip the undercarriage right off." Alessio's jaw tightened. "I don't need a tow. I need a ride. I'll pay you $10,000 to take me to the nearest city." He didn't have cash on him, but he intended to make her drive at gunpoint anyway. The woman snorted a harsh, dismissive sound. "Right, 10 grand. And I'm the Queen of England. You're out here in a $1 million car smelling like copper and burnt plastic. You're in trouble." She put the truck in gear. "I don't do trouble. Have a good night." "Wait!" Alessio stepped forward, desperation cracking his stoic facade. As he moved, a sharp pain shot through his shoulder, and he stumbled slightly, instinctively clutching his bleeding arm. The dark stain on his jacket became visible under the truck's headlights. The woman slammed on the brakes. She stared at the blood. Alessio saw the exact moment her self-preservation battled with her conscience. Before she could speak, the little boy leaned over again, his voice ringing out with absolute confidence. "My mom can fix it." Alessio looked at the child, then at the grease-stained woman. "I seriously doubt that," Alessio said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous gravel. "This is an SF90. It has a twin-turbo V8 and 3 electric motors." The computer locked the drivetrain. "My mum fixes everything," Leo insisted, crossing his arms. "She owns Jenkins Auto. She fixed Mr. Henderson's tractor and it was in a lake. Sarah Jenkins sighed, rubbing her temples. She turned off the ignition of the Ford, plunging the highway back into silence. She opened her door and stepped out onto the asphalt. She wasn't tall, but she carried herself with a defensive rigidity. She walked past Alessio without a hint of fear, kneeling near the rear of the Ferrari. "Pop the engine cover," she ordered. Alessio stared at her. "Did you not see the blood? I am not someone you should be giving orders to." Sarah stood up, meeting his deadly gaze without flinching. "I see the blood. I also see a guy who is shivering, stranded, and running out of options. I can either drive away and leave you to bleed out, or I can look at the car. But I can't look at the car if you don't unlock the damn hood." Alessio hesitated. Every instinct told him to pull his gun, take the truck, and run. But something about this woman Sarah anchored him. He reached through the open window of the Ferrari and triggered the release. The glass engine cover lifted, revealing the complex, beautiful, and utterly ruined heart of the Ferrari. Plumes of white vapor drifted upward. Sarah pulled a small, heavy-duty Pelican flashlight from her jacket pocket, clicking it on. The bright LED beam pierced the gloom, illuminating the intricate carbon fiber components and the severed lines. Alessio moved to stand beside her, keeping a watchful eye on the dark highway behind them. A piece of road debris kicked up. He lied smoothly. Hit a line. "Road debris," Sarah repeated dryly. She pointed the flashlight at the severed coolant tube. Funny how road debris leaves a perfectly round entry hole and frays the Kevlar shielding outward. "Looks more like a 9mm to me." "Maybe a 45. Alessio's eyes narrowed. He shifted his weight, his hand drifting closer to his lapel. "You know a lot about ballistics for a mechanic." "I grew up in Detroit, buddy. I know what bullet holes look like," she muttered, leaning closer to the engine. "You're lucky. It missed the high-voltage battery pack by about 2 inches. If it had hit that, we'd be standing in a crater right now." But it clipped the primary cooling circuit for the hybrid system. The thermal sensors read a massive pressure drop and commanded the ECU to cut power to prevent the engine from melting itself into slag. Alessio was genuinely taken aback. Most of the mechanics he employed at his chop shops in Queens would have scratched their heads at the SF90's hybrid architecture. This woman, smelling of cheap coffee and old motor oil, had diagnosed it in 30 seconds. "Can you fix it?" he asked, his tone shifting from commanding to inquiring. "Permanently? Out here? No. You need OEM parts, specialized fluid, and a proprietary diagnostic tablet that costs more than my house," Sarah said, stepping back. But if you just need to get the hell out of here before whoever put that hole in your car catches up, I can trick the computer." She walked briskly to her truck, rummaging through a heavy red snap-on toolbox in the bed. She returned with a roll of high-temperature silicone fusion tape, a pair of wire cutters, and a small brass coupling. Leo," Sarah called out to the truck. "Lock the doors. Keep your head down. 5 minutes." "Okay, Mom." Sarah turned back to the Ferrari. "I need you to hold the flashlight. Keep it steady on the severed line." Alessio took the heavy flashlight. His left arm throbbed violently, and his vision swam for a fraction of a second. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the stark reality of blood loss. Sarah noticed his sway. Before he could protest, she reached into her pocket, pulled out a clean packaged shop rag, and pressed it hard against his shoulder. Alessio hissed, his muscles tensing, ready to strike, but she held firm. "Hold that against it." "Tight," she commanded. "If you pass out on me, I'm stealing your wallet and leaving you for the wolves." Alessio pressed the rag against the wound, a grudging smirk playing on his lips. "You have a lot of nerve, Sarah Jenkins. And you have a lot of people who want you dead, I'm guessing," she replied, not looking up as she reached into the cramped engine bay. Her hands moved with practiced precision. She used the wire cutters to cleanly sever the frayed ends of the broken coolant line, then forced the brass coupling into the rubber hosing, wrapping it tightly with the fusion tape. "That stops the leak, but there's no fluid left in the reservoir," Alessio pointed out, watching her work. "The sensor will still lock the engine." "I know," Sarah said. She reached deeper into the wiring harness near the reservoir tank. The fluid level sensor works on a basic resistance circuit. When it's empty, the circuit opens, telling the computer you're dry. If I bridge the connector, she snipped 2 small wires, twisted the exposed copper together, and taped them off. The computer thinks the tank is full. She slammed the engine cover shut. It's going to run incredibly hot. You have maybe 3 miles before the engine block warps. and the pistons seize permanently. My shop is exactly 2.5 miles down this road, hidden off a logging trail. You can hide the car there. Suddenly, the hair on the back of Alessio's neck stood up. It was a sixth sense that had kept him alive for 35 years. He looked down the highway. In the distance, approaching fast from the south, were the wide-set LED headlights of a large SUV. "They're here," Alessio whispered, drawing his Glock. The cold steel felt heavy in his weakened grip. He looked at Sarah, then at the rusty Ford with the little boy inside. He was a monster, a man who ordered deaths over morning espresso, but he had a code. He didn't drag civilians into the crossfire, especially not children. "Get in your truck and drive away," Alessio ordered, his voice echoing with absolute authority. "Now, do not look back." Sarah looked at the approaching headlights, then at Alessio's pale face and the gun in his hand. She didn't run. Instead, she reached into the open window of the Ferrari, hit the ignition button, and prayed. The twin-turbo V8 roared to life, a furious, deafening symphony that shook the pavement. The dashboard lit up with a dozen red warning lights, but the engine was running. "Get in!" Sarah yelled over the roar, already sprinting toward her truck. Alessio didn't hesitate. He dropped into the low driver's seat of the Ferrari, throwing it into gear. The tires shrieked against the cold asphalt, leaving a cloud of white smoke as he launched the wounded hypercar forward. Behind him, Sarah's Ford F-150 tore onto the road, pushing its tired V8 to keep up. In his rearview mirror, Alessio saw the black Escalade accelerate, closing the distance. The fix was holding, but the temperature gauge on the dash was already climbing into the red. They were entering a deadly race against time, physics, and heavily armed men, all orchestrated by a small-town mechanic and a 7-year-old boy's innocent boast. The dashboard of the Ferrari SF90 Stradale was a terrifying mosaic of flashing red warnings. Engine overheat, hybrid system failure, imminent catastrophic shutdown. Alessio Romano ignored them all, his boots planted firmly on the accelerator. The twin-turbo V8 screamed in agony, starved of coolant, the internal friction generating enough heat to blister the paint on the rear deck lid. In the rearview mirror, the black Cadillac Escalade was a monstrous, unrelenting shadow. The high beams blinded Alessio every time the road straightened. They were closing the gap. The heavy SUV was built for brute force, but on the winding asphalt of Route 17, the wounded Ferrari still possessed the superior handling to keep them at bay for now. Suddenly, the rear window of the Escalade rolled down. The unmistakable matte black barrel of a suppressed Heckler & Koch MP5 submachine gun poked out into the freezing October night. Muzzle flashes flickered like deadly fireflies. Thwack, thwack, thwack. 3 9mm rounds punched into the Ferrari's reinforced carbon fiber rear bumper. Alessio swerved violently, the low-profile Michelin Pilot Sport tires screaming in protest as they gripped the cold asphalt. His left arm hung practically useless at his side, the makeshift bandage Sarah had applied already soaked through, dripping warm blood onto the luxurious Alcantara upholstery. He was driving a 1,000-horsepower hypercar with one good arm and failing vision. Ahead of him, Sarah's battered 2004 Ford F-150 swerved into the oncoming lane, her taillights flashing twice in rapid succession. The signal? Alessio saw it just in time, a barely visible, unpaved logging trail cutting sharply into the dense forest to their right. It was framed by overgrown pine branches, completely obscured to anyone who didn't know it was there. Sarah slammed on her brakes, drifting the heavy truck into the dirt path with the practiced ease of a moonshiner. Alessio downshifted brutally, the Ferrari's transmission violently protesting as he yanked the steering wheel to the right. The aerodynamic front splitter of the SF90 violently scraped against the uneven gravel, sending a shower of golden sparks into the dark woods as the car left the highway. Behind them, the Escalade's driver missed the turn. The massive SUV locked its brakes, skidding sideways across the highway in a cloud of burning rubber before violently throwing it into reverse to correct the mistake. Come on, Alessio muttered through gritted teeth. The logging trail was a nightmare for a car with less than 5 inches of ground clearance. The Ferrari bounced and bottomed out brutally, the carbon fiber undercarriage taking catastrophic damage with every jagged rock and deep rut. Mud and wet leaves flew up over the windshield. The temperature gauge on the digital cluster had completely maxed out. The engine was quite literally cooking itself to death. Through the trees, Alessio saw Sarah's truck accelerating up a steep, muddy incline. She was pushing the old Triton V8 engine to its absolute limit, the rear tires kicking up massive rooster tails of dirt. She navigated the treacherous, winding path purely by muscle memory, dodging massive oak stumps and deep, water-filled craters. A pair of headlights swept through the trees behind Alessio. The Escalade had found the trail. Equipped with four-wheel drive and off-road suspension, the heavy SUV was tearing through the woods, effortlessly devouring the terrain that was slowly destroying the Ferrari. "Romano, you're losing power!" Sarah's voice crackled suddenly through the Ferrari's Bluetooth system. She had somehow linked her phone to the car's open pairing network in the brief moments she was under the hood. "The engine block is melting, Sarah," Alessio rasped, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were bone white. The cabin was filling with the acrid, toxic smoke of burning synthetic oil and melting wire insulation. "I'm not going to make it." "Yes, you are," she ordered, her voice cutting through the panic with absolute, icy authority. 200 yards ahead, there's a sharp left bend. Right after the bend is a narrow wooden bridge over a creek. It was built in the 50s. It can barely hold my truck. It will not hold that armored tank behind you. Do not brake until you are across it. Understand?" "Understood," Alessio coughed, the smoke burning his lungs. He pushed the accelerator flat against the floorboard. The Ferrari gave one final, desperate surge of power. The trees blurred past. He hit the sharp left bend, the car fishtailing wildly in the slick mud. He fought the slide with his right hand, the muscles in his back screaming in agony. As he straightened out, he saw the bridge, a rotting, narrow structure of moss-covered timber suspended over a rocky ravine. Sarah's truck was already safely on the other side, waiting. Alessio hit the wooden planks at 70 miles per hour. The rotting timber groaned and splintered under the immense, downward aerodynamic force of the hypercar. He cleared the gap in a heartbeat, slamming on the carbon ceramic brakes the moment his tires hit solid dirt on the other side. 10 seconds later, the Escalade roared around the bend. The driver, blinded by bloodlust and the dust kicked up by the Ferrari, didn't register the decaying state of the bridge. The 3-ton armored Cadillac hit the wooden structure. The rusted steel support beams shrieked. With a deafening, violent crack, the center of the bridge collapsed. The Escalade plunged forward, its front axle burying itself into the opposite embankment as the rear of the vehicle fell into the creek below. The sound of tearing metal and shattering glass echoed through the silent forest as the heavy SUV was immobilized, trapped at a 45-degree angle in the ravine. Alessio let out a ragged breath, slumping back against the headrest. "Keep moving!" Sarah yelled over the speaker. "They aren't dead, just stuck. My shop is another quarter mile." Alessio put the car back in gear. The Ferrari limped forward, sounding like a dying animal. It made it exactly a quarter of a mile. As they pulled into a wide, heavily concealed clearing surrounded by tall pines, the outline of a massive, corrugated steel building emerged from the darkness. Several rusting husks of classic muscle cars littered the perimeter like steel ghosts. Jenkins Auto. Alessio pulled the Ferrari toward the large open bay doors of the garage. Just as the nose of the car crossed the threshold, the twin-turbo V8 seized with a violent, final shudder. A loud metallic bang echoed under the hood as a piston rod finally snapped and punched through the aluminum engine block. The car died instantly, plunging the cabin into silence. Alessio tried to open the door, but his strength was entirely gone. His vision tunneled into a dark, blurry pinpoint. The last thing he saw before slipping into unconsciousness was Sarah Jenkins sprinting toward his window, a heavy steel tire iron gripped tightly in her hand. Alessio awoke to the blinding glare of a halogen work light and the overwhelming smell of rubbing alcohol. He was lying on his back on a heavy-duty steel workbench in the center of the garage. His ruined Tom Ford jacket had been cut away, along with his blood-soaked shirt. He tried to sit up, but a sharp, blinding pain pinned him down. A hand pressed firmly against his uninjured shoulder. "Don't move, tough guy. I just got the bleeding to stop," Sarah said. Alessio blinked the harsh light out of his eyes. Sarah was standing over him, wearing black nitrile mechanics gloves. In her right hand, she held a curved suture needle threaded with thick, black nylon. To his horror, he realized it was automotive upholstery thread. "Tell me you didn't," Alessio groaned, his voice hoarse. "I had to." "You were leaking like a cracked oil pan," Sarah replied flatly, wiping away a smear of blood from his chest with an industrial blue shop towel. "The bullet took a clean chunk of flesh out of your deltoid and severed a minor vein. I flushed it with isopropyl alcohol and stitched it closed. It's ugly, but you aren't going to bleed to death on my workbench." Alessio looked around, The garage was massive, heavily insulated, and incredibly well equipped. 2 hydraulic lifts, a massive snap-on tool chest the size of a minivan, and a pristine, partially restored 1969 Mustang Mark 1 sat in the corner. The heavy steel bay doors were pulled shut and barred with a massive iron crossbeam. There were no windows. It wasn't just a mechanic's shop. It was a fortress. "Where is the boy?" Alessio asked immediately, his mobster instincts demanding total situational awareness. "Leo is in my office upstairs. Steel door, dead-bolted from the inside. He's got noise-cancelling headphones on, watching SpongeBob on an iPad. He thinks we're just working on a very noisy car," Sarah said, her voice softening just a fraction before hardening again. She pulled off the bloody gloves and threw them into a trash can. "Now, you're going to tell me exactly who is in those woods and why they are trying to put holes in you." Alessio slowly sat up, gritting his teeth as the crude stitches pulled at his skin. He looked at the woman standing before him. She was fiercely beautiful in the harsh light, her jaw set with a stubborn defiance that he rarely saw in his world. "My name is Alessia Romano," he said quietly, watching her face for a reaction. Most people in the tri-state area blanched at that name. The Romano Syndicate controlled the docks, the unions, and a significant portion of the illicit narcotics flowing into the eastern seaboard. Sarah didn't flinch. She just crossed her arms over her chest. "I know who you are. The tailored suit, the $1 million car, the customized Glock, 19 inches, an Italian leather shoulder holster. You scream organized crime. Who is chasing you?" "Genovese hitmen," Alessio answered truthfully. "A rival faction. My capo betrayed me tonight in Manhattan. They ambushed my motorcade. I was the only one who made it out." He paused, studying her. "You took a massive risk bringing me here, Sarah. When they get out of that ravine, they will come looking. Let them," Sarah said coldly. She walked over to a locked metal cabinet near the hydraulic lift. She punched a code into the electronic keypad and pulled the heavy door open. Alessio's eyes widened slightly. The cabinet wasn't filled with automotive tools. It was a perfectly organized armory. Racks of ammunition, 2 Remington 870 tactical shotguns, a pair of Beretta M9 handguns, and a customized AR-10 designated marksman rifle. "You're not just a mechanic from Detroit," Alessio stated, swinging his legs over the edge of the workbench. He ignored the throbbing in his shoulder. "Civilians don't have military-grade arsenals hidden behind their tool chests. And they certainly don't know how to keep their cool while under fire from a hit squad." Sarah pulled one of the Remington shotguns from the rack and began thumbing heavy 1-2 gauge double-aught buckshot shells into the tubular magazine. Click, clack, click, clack. The sound was rhythmic, practiced, and deeply unsettling. "You're right. I'm not just a mechanic," Sarah said, racking the pump action to chamber around. She turned to face him, her hazel eyes completely devoid of warmth. "My maiden name is Coretti. My father was Vincent Coretti. He ran the numbers and the illegal casinos for the Detroit Partnership back in the 90s. Alessio froze. Vincent the Viper Coretti. He was a legend in the underworld, a ruthless, brilliant enforcer who vanished without a trace 15 years ago after a brutal mob war tore Detroit apart. Coretti's daughter, Alessio, breathed, a grim smile touching his lips. It all made sense now. The lack of fear, the understanding of ballistics, the tactical driving. You were born into the life. Just like me. "I was born into a nightmare," Sarah corrected him fiercely, walking back toward the center of the garage. "I watched my father get gunned down in our own driveway when I was 18. I swore I would never let that world touch me again. I changed my name, moved to the middle of nowhere, learned to build engines, and had a son. I built a quiet, safe life." She stopped a few feet away from Alessio, the shotgun resting easily against her hip. "And then you brought the war to my front door, Romano." "I didn't ask you to stop on that highway," Alessio reminded her gently. For the first time in years, he felt a genuine twinge of guilt. He had dragged a woman who had successfully escaped the Mafia right back into its crosshairs. "You could have driven away. You were bleeding out, and Leo was watching." "I'm not letting my son see me leave a man to die on the side of the road," she shot back. "But make no mistake, I'm not protecting you because I care about the Romano Syndicate. I'm protecting you because if those Genovese animals find this garage, they won't leave witnesses. They'll kill me, and they'll kill my boy." Alessio stood up, his bare chest heaving slightly. He reached over with his uninjured right hand and picked up his Glock from the workbench where Sarah had placed it. He checked the action, ignoring the pain radiating down his left side. "They won't touch him. Or you," Alessio swore, his dark eyes locking onto hers. The vow wasn't just a Mafia promise, it felt heavier, etched into his very soul in that dimly lit garage. I need a phone, Sarah. A hard line. If I can reach my brother Matteo, I can have 30 armed men here in helicopters before the sun comes up. There's a landline on the desk by the bay doors, Sarah pointed, with the barrel of the shotgun. Make the call. Fast. Alessio walked to the desk, picked up the greasy receiver, and dialed a number he had memorized since childhood. The phone rang once, twice. Matteo, Alessio said when the line clicked open. Alessio? Cristo, brother, where are you? The city is on fire. Carlo flipped. They hit your safe houses. Matteo's voice was frantic, thick with panic and rage. I know. I'm upstate. Route 17, near Monticello. I'm injured, but alive. Send the tactical teams to these coordinates. Before Alessio could finish the sentence, a deafening explosion rocked the garage. The heavy steel bay doors buckled inward, with a horrific screech of tearing metal. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling rafters. The Genovese hitmen hadn't just hiked out of the ravine, they had brought C4 explosives. They're here, Alessio barked into the phone, dropping the receiver. He raised his Glock. Sarah stood beside him, raising the Remington 870 to her shoulder, her face a mask of pure, lethal determination. The daughter of the Detroit outfit and the boss of the New York syndicate stood shoulder to shoulder as the steel doors groaned, ready to give way to the wolves outside. The heavy, corrugated steel doors tore inward, screaming off their rusted hinges. A concussive blast of C4 pulverized the concrete barricade, filling the garage with blinding, acrid white smoke. Icy October wind rushed into the heated space, instantly mixing with the scent of vaporized oil and burnt cordite. Alessio Romano didn't hesitate. Ignoring the blinding agony in his hastily stitched shoulder, he dropped behind the solid steel frame of a massive snap-on tool chest. Next to him, Sarah Coretti moved with the terrifying muscle memory precision of a woman raised in a war zone. She braced the Remington 870 against her shoulder, her hazel eyes narrowed into lethal slits. Through the settling dust, 4 tactical flashlights pierced the gloom, attached to the barrels of suppressed Heckler and Koch MP5 submachine guns. The hitmen fanned out, their boots crunching over shattered glass. Sweep the corners, a harsh voice barked from the darkness. The voice made Alessio's blood run cold. It was Carlo. His most trusted capo hadn't just orchestrated the ambush in Manhattan. He had followed the tracker to ensure the king of the New York syndicate was dead. Before Alessio could fully process the betrayal, a hitman stepped into the light of the overhead halogens, his weapon raised. Sarah didn't flinch. She squeezed the trigger. The roar of the .22 gauge shotgun was deafening. A swarm of double-aught buckshots slammed into the hitman's Kevlar vest with the force of a freight train, lifting him off his feet and throwing him violently backward into a rusted Camaro. He didn't get back up. Contact! Another gunman shouted, unleashing a hail of suppressed 9mm rounds. Bullets sparked wildly off the heavy steel tool chest, showering Alessio and Sarah in metal shavings. Alessio leaned out from the right flank, his customized Glock 19 finding its target. He fired twice, center mass and head. The second hitman crumpled to the concrete. Alessio! Carlo's voice echoed through the garage, dripping with false sympathy. The traitor remained hidden. I didn't expect you to find a heavily armed guardian angel in the middle of the Catskills. Who is she? A local sweetheart. She's the woman who is going to dig your grave, Carlo, Alessio growled, slapping a fresh magazine into his Glock. He looked at Sarah. Her face was pale, but her hands were rock steady as she chambered another shell. Such a tragedy, boss. Carlo taunted, stepping slowly into the periphery of the light. He wore a dark trench coat, holding a compact Sig Sauer MCX rifle. The Genovese family offered me the docks. It's strictly business. Carlo's eyes scanned the massive garage, taking in the heavy machinery, the weapons cabinet, and finally, the reinforced steel staircase leading to the loft office. A cruel smile spread across his face. A fortified office. Now, why would a mechanic need a dead-bolted steel door up there? Unless she's hiding someone. Sarah's breath hitched. The hardened tactical facade cracked for a fraction of a second. You take one step toward those stairs, Sarah said, her voice dropping to a terrifying absolute zero, and I will hollow you out. Take the stairs, Carlo ordered his 2 remaining men. Flush them out. If the kid makes a sound, silence him. The men sprinted toward the steel staircase. Alessio raised his pistol, but his angle was blocked by the hydraulic lift. Sarah didn't shoot at the men. Instead, she spun around, aiming the Remington at a large, upright green cylinder chained to the wall, a high-pressure industrial oxygen tank. "Cover your ears!" she screamed. She fired, the heavy buckshot tearing through the brass regulator valve. The result was instantaneous. Deprived of its valve, pressurized oxygen blasted out with a deafening shriek. The heavy steel cylinder became an unguided missile, ripping free of its chains and rocketing across the concrete. It slammed into the legs of the first hitman, shattering his shins and sweeping him off his feet. The cylinder careened wildly, smashing into the base of the staircase and releasing a blinding cloud of freezing, pressurized gas. The second hitman stumbled back, completely disoriented by the whiteout. Alessio capitalized on the chaos. He broke from cover, sliding across the grease-stained floor. He extended his right arm, firing 3 rapid shots into the disoriented hitman, dropping him instantly. Silence fell over the garage, broken only by the hissing of the depleted oxygen tank. Carlo was completely exposed. He stared at his dead men, the arrogant smirk vanishing. He raised his rifle toward Alessio, but he was a fraction of a second too late. "Business is closed, Carlo," Alessio said. He fired one perfectly aimed shot. The hollow point round caught Carlo square in the chest. The traitor's eyes widened in shock as the rifle slipped from his grasp. He staggered backward before collapsing in a lifeless heap near the shattered doors. Alessio lowered his weapon, his chest heaving. He looked over at Sarah. She had dropped the shotgun and was staring at the heavy steel door at the top of the stairs. "Leo," she choked out, sprinting up the metal steps. Before Alessio could follow, a deep, rhythmic thrumming vibrated through the floor. Outside, the dark sky was illuminated by the searchlights of 2 Black Hawk helicopters, men in heavy tactical gear fast roped to the ground. A sleek Mercedes G-Wagon tore into the clearing, and Matteo Romano sprinted into the ruined garage. "Alessio!" Matteo shouted, taking in the carnage. "We secured the perimeter. Are you hit?" "I'm fine, Matteo," Alessio said softly, his eyes fixed on the stairs. "Clean this up. Leave no trace." The heavy steel door unlocked with a loud clack. Sarah stepped out, holding her small, curly-haired boy. Leo still wore his noise-canceling headphones, clutching a Batman toy, completely unharmed. As Sarah walked down, Matteo and the heavily armed syndicate soldiers parted, creating a path of absolute respect. They knew exactly who had held the line. "Is the bad noisy car gone, Mum?" Leo asked, his innocent voice piercing the silence. "Yeah, baby," Sarah whispered, kissing his head, a tear cutting a clean path through the motor oil on her cheek. "It's gone." Leo looked up at Alessio, noticing the bloody bandages. "Did my mum fix your spaceship, mister?" Alessio looked at the ruined Ferrari on the lift, then back at Sarah Coretti, the fierce exile who had saved his life and unknowingly captured his heart. A genuine, exhausted smile touched his lips. "Yeah, kid," Alessio murmured softly, his dark eyes locking onto Sarah's. "She fixed it. She fixed everything." The rusted Ford had bridged 2 colliding worlds, forging an unbreakable bond in blood and motor oil. Alessio Romano, the untouchable king of New York, finally found his equal in a fierce, grease-stained Detroit exile. Sarah Coretti didn't just save a shattered $1 million hypercar on a frozen highway, she completely salvaged the fractured soul of a ruthless mafia boss. Her young son was absolutely right. His mum could fix anything,